The same people love Shakespeare.
Yeah.
People die for hip hop.
Niggas say they never heard a nigga rhyme like this before. They acting like they never ever heard a hit before. You wanna sign me? Shit, I'm gonna need a little more. Tryna make a little more like Macklemore. No dotted line, I ain't sign it. I ain't fresh, but I got a new line. We the best niggas, shit, I ain't hiding. Lay the crown on my knee while I shine.
If you look at Tupac's Dear Mama, add a couple doths, thous, and moros, you essentially have a Shakespearean sonnet. Now, in the eyes of society, there's a vast difference between hip-hop and poetry. They're on different levels of respect, different levels of merit, particularly when it comes to education. A college applicant with hip-hop studies on their resume in comparison to a student who has Shakespeare 101 are going to be looked at very differently. To explore this discrepancy within the broader framework of hip-hop education, I'm Aiyah Josiah-Faeduwor, and this is Clues-Free TV.
And in a year, goddamn it, he'll be 22. Eyes on the prize, don't need advisors, man, I'm over school. Don't need advisors, see the future 2022. Don't pay a penny, pay attention while I tension you, that's my intention, just to mention.
How do you define hip-hop? Like, what are we talked a little bit about elements, but as a b-boy, what is your definition of hip-hop?
Okay, so hip hop, that's a deep question.
Yeah.
That's a very deep question. So hip hop is a lot of things. Like you said, it's a culture.
Mm-hmm.
So hip hop it's a culture, right? And along with that, it's also a consciousness.
Okay.
It's a lifestyle. It's something that you embody.
Okay.
And so like you can think about the elements of hip hop, you know, breaking, graffiti, MCing, DJing, and so on. You know, there's more as things have like evolved. Because when you understand what hip hop is like it's this kind of underlying thing, and then these like artistic manifestations are just like reflections of that consciousness.
Right.
And you can even see like similarities within the different elements.
Right.
That are like. They're reflecting the same thing.
Right.
So like the same way like an MC would freestyle, like a b-boy freestyle.
Yeah.
You don't know exactly what you're gonna do, but you understand what you're doing so much,
right?
And so well enough, and you understand your perspective that music comes on.
Right.
You add that perspective to it in that moment.
That's dope. Even thing like graffiti artists, just straight up, how are you gonna just start spraying?
Again, it has to do with this kind of. You know, there's a lot to it. Hip hop is also like, it's being real, it's being authentic.
Right.
One time someone asked me like, what's the artistic virtue, or you know, what's the main principle, the aesthetic virtue of hip hop? And I really think that it's authenticity. It's being real. Like if you, you know, you think hip hop, like that comes up so many times. It's like, oh, you gotta be real.
Right.
Oh, you gotta be raw.
Okay.
Like, what is that? You know what I mean? It's kind of just, it's like honesty.
Right.
To me, that's what it is. And especially as a b-boy, you don't know where you're gonna go. You're so limited by gravity and the limitations of your body. You just gotta go where you can.
Right.
And then it'll go.
Like what, as an artist in particular, I'm curious, what is the responsibility artists have to, hip hop artists have to society, to hip hop culture? Do you feel that as artists you can, or any artist can do whatever they want, express whatever they want?
The age-old question.
Yes, but I wonder your perspective.
So I personally feel like a lot of artists, the same way I started off, is very therapeutic. So it's very much personal and for self. So you're not really worried about the bigger picture. You don't really see or feel the bigger picture yet. And you sort of, there's always that idea of free speech and like freedom. It's my art, so I can say whatever I want. I can be as vulgar as I want, as peaceful and inspiring as I want. Where it turned for me was when people would come up to me and they would literally tell me things like, this song like means so much to me. Like I cried listening to the songs I've been through. Like I have a song where I talk about friends who have mental health issues. I performed it at a show in Providence, and this kid came up to me afterwards and was like, yo, I cried when you performed that song because you were talking about my life exactly. And so when you start seeing, you already know how powerful music is to yourself because that's why you're doing it. When you start seeing how much your music affects other people, that's when the responsibility starts to sink in, and you're like, okay, I can't always say exactly whatever I want, but at the same time, you can't lose your artistic license.
Right.
And so your job is to say exactly how you feel and to speak for those who can't be spoken. That's what it is for me more than anything else, is the people who have no voice to speak for them.
That's real. So yeah, to that, So the population that you speak to, is that affected at all by, you're currently a student, soon to be college graduate? A lot of the consumers of hip hop aren't necessarily the most educated. So how do you speak, or how do you defend like who you speak to and how you speak?
So one thing I'm always conscious of is that you have to be the best way, the most effective way to deliver your message is to be yourself.
Right.
So that of course comes with limitations because you are you. So not everyone is going to love you or hate you. So you have a certain finite amount of people you can speak to. The way I try and speak to people who might not relate to me is to speak in their language. So, for example, my mom, I have this song called Heaven, which is 2 parts, and the first half is like a classical piece. It's almost like an opera, and then the second half is just the most ratchet recklessness you've ever seen, right? And I love that so much because I play it to my mom, right? And she's like, oh, this is amazing, I love this. And it switches and she's like mortified, right? And I play it to my friends and they're like, what the hell is this at the beginning? And then it switches and they're like, this is amazing. So that being able to speak, it's all one language, but we all kind of go through the same thing. So being able to just tweak exactly how you deliver the message certain times allows you to speak to this people this time than this other people. So I try to speak to as wide a population as possible because I think ultimately it's going to be a positive impact that's going to make. So the more people I can reach, the better, I think.
Right.
But reaching them, it depends on how you speak the language and how you deliver the message.
High School for Recording Arts is a phenomenal story and example, and I couldn't not have that be like a centerpiece in a book about hip-hop education, especially when I'm talking about what is it, hip-hop style of teaching and learning, school design and school leadership, because that school is hip-hop. I mean, the founder was a rapper who had, David T.C. Ellis, had his own struggles in traditional education, had found his home in an alternative school. That had really been a turning point in his life. And then he'd had this career. He was a signed major label rap artist. And he started the school inadvertently almost. He had a recording studio and young people were coming there and he saw an opportunity. And that, the entrepreneurial spirit and the fact that as someone who had kind of dropped out of high school himself, been through all sorts of trials and tribulations, didn't have a formal training as an educator, would be in a recording studio with a bunch of young people and say, I think I could turn this into a school. Like that's the kind of swagger and like entrepreneurial vision and flipping something out of nothing that I find to be like emblematic of hip hop culture, right? That you had these artists who were saying like, yeah, I might have come up in the projects in New York and yeah, all these labels may have turned me down. I'm gonna start my own label and then I'm gonna let them pay me just for the right to distribute my music. That kind of audaciousness. I saw him doing that, but in the education world. And he like brought that exact energy into education. And so I was really, saw that what he was doing embodied what I was talking about. And I would still say it's the same today. I mean, the school's been up for like 20 years now. They've got a new building, incredible studios, but they're doing all of this stuff around it that's really interesting. That's the kind of stuff I talk about in the book, the way they're pulling all these different educational and kind of human service elements, all of this stuff, like they're weaving into creating this institution that's really different. So they're still total leaders in that space, but there are a lot more folks doing pieces of this work. Certainly there's both more and they're louder now, right? Like I think before people were kind of sneaking the boombox into the classroom, closing the door and actually A, not trying to make a lot of noise because they weren't sure if they'd get in trouble and kicked out, and B, we didn't have social media, we didn't have YouTube. Like the idea that you could so easily record really high quality video and audio and tell your story to the world, it was not like that even just when I started doing this work, which is not that long ago. So you're just seeing a lot more of it now too, I think, because we all have the means of production to share the work.
I mean, I see, and that's, I think you bring up a really good and really important point. Because you're describing, hip hop as almost a vehicle, as opposed to the content itself necessarily. And you can bring in the content, like if you're using the terms, give them the structure, and then, set them up to be able to use it in their own way. Yes. And hip hop can be the vehicle that allows students to learn it in their own way. Yes. And I think that's an important point. So in your experience and your opinion, you have been a hip hop head for a long time, I'm sure, and you went to a place like Brown, a very, institutional or very prestigious institution. How do you feel your appreciation, love for hip hop impacted your application and your candidacy at Brown? Was that a part of your application in any way?
To get into Brown?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, so it was in the fact, so I wrote my college essay about, so I was breaking in the hallway. This is what I did in high school. Every day, and they used to make fun of me when I was a freshman.
Right.
And then I got better, they stopped making fun of me, and people started to like me. I used to practice outside of the main hallway. The doors would be right here. The whole rest of the school is here, and then I would be breaking right here. So the whole school ends up walking by, but this is the one place they let me practice. It was in front of the main office. Anyways, I practiced there every day after school, every day, and for my whole career there. But I remember sophomore year, one time the teacher walked by me, the math teacher, and she was like, "Oh." She saw me breaking, and I was like, I was such an innocent, happy kid, and she was just like, "Oh, I hope your grades are as good as I hope you're as good a student as you are a performer." And she kind of said it like that, and I was just like, it really made me start to doubt myself. Like, what? Like, don't you see? Like, I'm doing my thing. Like, what do you mean you hope I'm as good a student as a performer? I get straight A's.
Right.
Like, hell yeah, I am.
Right.
So I wrote about that and how that kind of this perception of what I was doing as negative, when I was putting my heart into it, I was putting my integrity into that. And then the move that I did right after that, because she made me angry, was a backspin. I broke record for backspins.
Yeah, I saw that.
I worked freaking hard.
Right.
But to be perceived, and no hate towards her, but it made me think. It made me think a lot. So it was actually not even the content of, oh, this is hip hop.
Right.
Now the school is gonna accept the fact that it's hip hop necessarily. Although maybe it was a unique perspective.
Right.
And I thought that might have helped me. But it was also a lot about just what I was doing and putting my passion into. Which though, I think hip hop is something that people can put their passion into. Again, in breaking. Okay, the foundation is so diverse. You can do flips, or you can do spins, or you can do just footwork, or you can just top rock, or you can do something in the middle. You can do threads. You can do this. So
I can't do any.
I'm sure. Oh, I bet you. You know what? If you really tried, I bet you. Oh, you know what? I can rock it.
Right.
I can. Hell yeah! I'll do some footwork. You know.
Yeah.
The thing is though, if you put your passion into something, it comes out dope anyway.
Right.
The greats of anything, who are greatest comedian, greatest basketball player, they're both great.
Right.
So
they put their 110% in. They did their 10,000 hours.
I tell the truth and you so Hakeem. What kind of lies you on the wrong side? Divide the misguided, tried to be nice, but I had to fight for my rights. I write to ignite the mic and take flight. Switch gears on the bars like a mountain biking in sight.
So, given that perspective, how do you see this duality of Shakespeare as essentially a poet but a lyricist, in comparison to yourself or other hip hop artists who are lyrical as well, or lyricists as well? Do you think do you see it as just a different language for a different crowd, but nonetheless at a similar plane, or do you see Shakespeare?
That's such an amazing question, because I don't think anyone really knows exactly what it is. The first thing that comes to mind is race a lot of the time, right? But so I personally think some of the best poets of all time, and I'm a classics major, I study Latin and Greek, right? So I try and aspire to be better than Homer. I don't try and be better than Jay-Z or this person. I'm looking at people whose poetry has lasted 2,000 years. That's my competition, right? So to me, I think some of the things I've heard in the last 10 years are as good as things I heard 2,000 years ago. And I've seen both of them. Okay. But I can't articulate that to someone who doesn't understand the language. It comes back to the language. So I think the vast majority of people don't understand what Tupac is saying, Biggie, all the way to a Gucci Mane, all the way to a Future, to Lil Wayne, to Drake. All these, everyone gives each person a certain level of validation, this is stupid, it doesn't make sense. But then why are they a cult hero where they came from in that block in deep in Miami somewhere or Florida somewhere.
Yeah.
But Shakespeare is known worldwide. It's just, I feel like maybe there's a smaller demographic of people that understand that language. So they're the only ones that can be accessed with that music. But I personally feel like some of the best, most inspirational poets, lyricists, whatever you want to call them, came in the last 30 years when hip hop was born. Because to me, it's the truest art form because it comes from a place of pain and brutal honesty. I think that's what's missing. I think it's the most effective news source for the youth because people will tell you exactly what it is. There's no sugarcoating. Sometimes there's nice wordplay and whatever, but when it really cuts through, that's what really hits you, is when it's the rawness about it. I think the people can't handle the rawness, and so they look at it as vulgar or violent, and then they look at something as Shakespeare, like this is nicely packaged, it's more pleasant.
That's interesting because, the thing is, it's not like Shakespeare is like distributed and easily received. I remember when we were reading Shakespeare, before we read Shakespeare, we spent like 2 weeks learning the language of Shakespeare. Is it Elizabethan era language? And we would have make a couple mama's jokes with Elizabethan language. I was like, why are we even doing this? And then they brought in Shakespeare. So it's not even like it comes easily packaged. It's a lot, the words and the language and stuff, like the error you're given a lot of pretext before you're even engaging with the text. Yeah. So do you feel like it's, as you said, like the hesitancy because of like the vulgar language, some of the motifs and themes, like the aggression, like the violence? Is it, more of that people are hesitant about, or do you think there's an other piece about like just the merit of the literacy, like, and understanding that Fetty Wap versus Rakim, we're talking about different level of language, but nonetheless, if you take high level hip hop and you take Shakespearean, language, and you remove what society prefers and all that, do you feel that they're at the same level?
Well, off the top of my head, I think they are definitely the same level. Okay. I put Homer, Shakespeare right next to people like, my favorite rapper personally is Ab-Soul. Oh yeah? That's one example. And people you've mentioned, Rakim, we know who what is considered high level conscious hip hop is, right? It's a language barrier, but part of the reason people can sit down and learn the language of Shakespeare is because it's nice. Yeah. It's easily approachable. But trying to learn the language of even Rakim, someone who's a high level, so we classify as intelligent, conscious hip hop and rap, it's still it's not naturally taken in by most people. Yeah. So it's just because it's also music, and Shakespeare. That's another thing that is particular to rap, is that it comes with a delivery. Right. Whereas Shakespeare does come with its own delivery, but you can read Shakespeare and understand the energy of it, but you miss a lot of the energy when you read. You can't read DMX's lyrics. It's a whole different it's a whole different mindset, So I think, it's taking the time out to learn the language, and also wanting and feeling comfortable enough to learn the language, because it always just seems like, whoa, that's too much over there. I'd rather sit down with some Shakespeare.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in some ways the deepest reason for me was around wanting them to know that they could handle it, because I feel like it gets put up as this like elite thing that like it's sort of assumed that they, a lot of the teachers that teach in environments like that will be like, they'll say that maybe like the outsiders would be like the most like kind of sophisticated thing or whatnot. And I think like I wanted them to all walk away, even if they were like, I hate Shakespeare and I never want to read it again, being like, I've read it, I've understood it, I can handle it. If you forced me to read it, or if I was put in a situation, I could. If I choose not to, that's my, it's not out of fear or feeling inferior or that I can't handle it. It's actually knowing that I've read it before. And if somebody asks, like I catch the reference, yes, I understand what you're talking about, but it's not my preference. Like I wanted to I felt like doing a short unit where they could at least feel like I've done that. Felt significant to me, having sort of seen what was going on in there. And as much as I love bringing in rap lyrics, like I don't think they play that role. Like they can play a role of saying, I'm studying a very sophisticated form of literature, and I can analyze it, and I can use terms like metaphor and simile and alliteration and so, rhyme schemes, and like I can get very analytical and technical in my breakdown of it. And I know that may be just as sophisticated, if not more so, linguistically, in terms of content, all these things. But at the same time, when you say Shakespeare, I don't panic. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, yeah, that too. And now I can actually tell you how it's similar and different from the rap songs that I've studied. So I wanted them to like have that. That was the biggest motivation. I mean, it's also like part of standards.
The question is, when it comes to hip hop in education, right? So if only some can, authentically teach it, the question also comes then, can everyone authentically receive it? And if you have someone authentically, teaching it, maybe they can reach every type of student. Is that possible? And if so, or if not, then is teaching Shakespeare a better alternative? Because, it's something that, at least like in the way the schools are set up now, it's something that has been attempted to be taught to everybody. Yes. So if Shakespeare has had more success in being taught to everybody, and hip hop has to have this like piece of authenticity to learn, can hip hop be expected to essentially replace Shakespeare? Can it do what Shakespeare does?
Can it do what Shakespeare does? That's a great question. Well, is Shakespeare received by everyone anyways? Or are there people who are like, man, this is whack.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't relate to it. It doesn't connect. So I think the important thing about hip hop is like you're using it to get a connection that you understand for yourself. So like I saw something, I think it was a member of Wu-Tang, I think it was Jizza, who had like the science. Have you guys heard of that? Like the science, he was rapping, like MCing, and they were learning about photosynthesis or something.
I've never seen that.
And then the kid was rapping about photosynthesis. It's like, oh, that's fresh. Like, what I think he was doing was allowing him to understand. I mean, again, I don't want to speak for anyone else's what was going on in their head, but like it seemed like, you write something about it, it rhymes, right? You have these limitations that okay, it has to rhyme, it has to be like this. Okay, these are the rules. Now write something about it that fits into those boxes. Okay, all right, now I get it. If I want to, like in break. So I'm probably going off track, but I'll get this part and then...
I'm following you.
So like in breaking, like if I want to do a move, like I'll do, if I wanted to make up a totally new move, and I've tried this with kids when I wasn't as wise. I was like, just do something, see what happens. And sometimes it works, but is it going to work for everyone in the class? Not necessarily, but you give them a rule, you go, okay, here's a CC, where CC is when you whip one leg up like this, bah, right? And you can do it however, right? That's the foundation. I go, okay, you guys know CC? Like, yeah, we know CC. I'm like, all right, how can you change it? My God, my kids just
went crazy.
Everything. I had kids like grabbing their foot, doing a CC, and then like hopping on their other knee because I gave them like a box that they understood what that box was. They could relate to that box, and then the limitation bred creativity. Right. They could do anything. Right. And that's what the kids love. Right. And that's what I love about breaking. If you watch breaking, like that's kind of what's happening. People are taking this foundation, going beyond it. Okay. So iambic pentameter is probably a really great thing. Right. You say, okay, here's the rules. Right, here's the box. Now can we understand it? Can we see how we can move around this? Okay. The question is, how much do kids relate to that? Right. And can kids relate more to like, all right, you're gonna write like bars. Right. All you gotta do is say bars. Yeah. And kids like bars. Okay. If you try with Shakespeare, you could be like bard. Right.
That's very real. And I feel like that's definitely something that students, who come from particular backgrounds, how they respond to things like Shakespeare, because not only is the language different, or not only is the lifestyle different, the time different, the language different, the way that one would communicate these things. You listen, you read the sonnet 29, whatever the famous one is. Yeah, and you're like, shall I compare these? You're outside telling her all these things you're going to compare it to. Like, that's not real. That's not
going to happen. Yeah, it's not realistic. Yeah.
So that's another piece, another question, kind of like, like, do you feel that there is a difference altogether? What is the difference between like rap and poetry? Because you mentioned like the delivery being a component.
Yes, that'll be the first thing. Is definitely the delivery, even if it's spoken word, the delivery alone is important. And then also the music adds a whole other level to it as well. And I was always a musician first before a rapper, and I always think of everything from the music standpoint as opposed to the lyrics. So I tell the story that way too, so that also plays into it. And again, if the lyrics are very dumbed down, it makes sense that the instrumental is very turned up and very aggressive. That also plays into it. But the difference between the two, I'd say, it's packaging. I think people are scared of the packaging the same way they're scared of the truth. So if something is tied with a nice little Shakespeare ribbon on top of it, that's oh, this is beautiful, I love my kid to learn this. But when something is just thrown at your face, then it's like, I don't know about that. No, I got to protect my kid from this. But that's what the reality is. That's what the world is, and that's what people are hiding from.
Very real.
Yeah, the difference between the two, I personally feel like they're the same. It takes the same level of intelligence to create both. The same connection is possible. The same way people love Shakespeare, people die for hip hop. There's a reason for that, and rap music. I think really it's the packaging, and some people can't accept the packaging. Some people love that packaging. They want it to be right in your face, and they understand why it's like that. But for the most part, people don't agree with that.
For the money, the money, the money, the money, the money, the money. All for the money, the money, the money, the money. They do it all with money.
It's interesting because there are models and there are schools that have adapted hip-hop pedagogies where they have ciphers in the classroom where, and it's a really, and they've had a lot of progress.
It's about time.
And the thing is, it's been going on for a while, and it's only kind of gotten more popular as of recent. But they're still struggling with the institutional expectations. So as someone who's technically institutionalized, you're in college, you know what I mean? How do what is you feel your obligation to deliver a particular message that is also leading people the route you went?
It all comes back to truth, and I'll come back to that at the end, right? But the way I look at it is, a lot of people would expect, the way my year's been this year, my music's gone a lot of places in 1 year, right? A lot of people would expect me to think, drop out of school and pursue it now. But I always tell any artist who come up to me or aspiring artist that staying in school is the best thing I did, because all of that happened because I was in school, not just because I have 5,000 kids that listen to my music just because they go to the same school as me, but also the intelligence I've gained being in school, the experiences, meeting people from different cultures, that all ties in. I want to go to law school. That's not taking away from my time as a musician. That's just adding value. So that's just increasing my brain power. So no one can corrupt my mind. No one can take my money. No one. All of it. My dad always told me law school isn't a backup plan. It's all a part of the plan. It all comes together. So I would always say, go to school, go to college, all the way to the fullest. Go to grad school, get your master's. That's not for everyone, but as far as you feel like you can take it, get all your education. But in terms of like the obligation, like in a classroom, like in an academic setting, there's this quote that so my mom, like I said, my mom listens to my music and thinks, your music's great, but I just wish you wouldn't curse so much. And I'm like, and I always wonder, like, how can I explain this? I never said anything because I was like, I know she understands that she doesn't understand it, so I'm gonna just let it rock for now. But there's this quote I found, and I definitely forgot who said it, but it's something about profanity. And I can't remember the whole quote, but it ends, sometimes subtlety just doesn't cut it. And that always stuck with me because that's the truth. If you bang your knee in this wall right now, you're not gonna be like, blast. Like, you might just be like, you know what I'm saying? So sometimes, and that is the same pain and energy that comes from hip hop. Like, I don't write curses because I think it's cool or because I have nothing else to say. Sometimes, like, you're passionate and subtlety isn't gonna explain everything I'm trying to say right now. Like, you need to hear the raw emotions. So, with that said, trying to put that in an academic mold and use it as an institution is always going to be hard because the institution is on the Shakespeare side, always. I personally think it's wrong to remove that from it. Like when I was talking at the school at this charter school downtown recently, I performed a couple songs, and I asked before to the teachers who were sitting in the back, I said, okay, if I curse, do you want me to, I can absolutely bleep them out. And they said, no, say every curse word.
Say them louder.
And so but that was my reaction too, and that made sense because they understood the educational value of course, that's not the case all the way around the board, but there's some of Shakespeare's peers, I'm not even a rapper. Some of Shakespeare's peers.
He is though.
I'm sure that's the peers. They weren't clean cut like that either. They were some of the people talking about violence and blah blah and exploiting the art form and using it the wrong way. So, of course, not everyone is going to use the curse words in the right way, but for the most part, they're there for a reason. Even if it's not always clean cut, the emotion is directed in those words for a reason. I use the F word, the N word for a specific reason. Yeah. So in that context, I think it needs to be a part of the academic understanding of the whole thing, because that's a huge part of it. There's a reason why there's this problem in the first place, that there's too much cursing, too much violence, and too much art imitates life, and not the other way around. That's a reality.
If you're looking at the value of art or the value of creating something, and you're saying, okay, I think it's valuable if it's authentic, if it's real. But if you're not thinking on those terms necessarily, because I think that's what is definitive about hip hop, the realness. So if other people aren't thinking in terms of realness, okay, that is real, yeah, all right, I like that. In general, if they're thinking that it lies somewhere else, you know what I mean, the value. Then maybe they won't see the value of everyone having their own unique style when they go out and do it, and having it, not just having their own unique style, and everyone's like, oh yeah, well that guy's kind of whack, that guy. No, but they're all dope, but they're all different. Whoa, how? Yeah. How? What is that reflecting? Like, and even being able to do something spontaneously, like on beat, that's original, that resonates with people, that's a logical idea, blah blah blah. How can we? But people aren't able to see as far as that. If you're not looking for, especially when hip hop gets a negative rap. No pun intended. When
I like that.
When people see hip hop, a lot of times people see hip hop as something like, it's negative, it's materialistic, it's superficial. It's almost like it's not any of that actually.
Right. The real
hip hop is not any of it. So you have this huge, the two are being
disparity. It's like a gap. I think that is one of the main cruxes of why hip-hop in academia is a tough thing for society to kind of accept, is because there are different perceptions of hip-hop.
Yes.
And there's a mainstream perception that's based off, the artists that sell the most, which aren't necessarily those who keep to the metrics and the realness of hip-hop.
Yeah.
And then those that are really authentic about it. And so those who are hip-hop educators are thinking in the terms of the real representation of hip-hop. But the mainstream America is like, you want to bring Lil Wayne 101 to a high school classroom? Nah, we're not having that.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you were teaching Tupac in comparison to Shakespeare, that would probably be a little bit more marketable. But it's that perception.
Even then, people might look at it like, he's swearing.
Yeah.
He's talking about guns and violence, and so it's seen as a very vulgar thing. Whereas Shakespeare, but Shakespeare is seen as a traditional, cultured thing. So it's almost like, how do you talk about it?
Okay.
Because it's hard. It's hard because if you grew up living in a particular environment where that was the norm, maybe it would make sense to where vulgar words were really all around. I think some people are growing up without that. Right. I didn't grow up really with too much of that. Well, what am I trying to say? I'm trying, not no one swore around me. That's obviously not true. But I'm trying to say that if you grew up in a place that was more sheltered versus more harsh, it might make more or less sense to have that. That perception is either going to be foreign or relatable.
But that's also crazy too, because it's not like Huckleberry Finn and other texts that are canons didn't have racial epithets and other language that wasn't a little abrasive and something that you wouldn't feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's true.
You imagine in high school the kids were like, I'm reading this part out loud, I can't wait to get to this part. So it's not like that stuff is necessarily pure either in that sense.
Yep.
So, but that's crazy though that Tupac would be considered inappropriate.
I do think that we haven't really talked about this, but hip hop culture was created and has been predominantly innovated and led by black people in this country.
Right.
Our education, the teaching force or whatever, is predominantly white.
Right.
And there is a cultural question there. It's not that white people can't incorporate elements of hip-hop pedagogy or hip-hop text into their teaching. But I think there's questions around race and culture that have to also be addressed. And so when we're thinking about what are the biggest roadblocks to like high quality and successful hip-hop education, I think we also have to think about things like what is the pipeline into teaching, what is the kind of cultural competence.
And what spaces do you feel like hip-hop ed can exist, and what spaces do you feel like it's going to face the most resistance, given that in order to be authentic and effective with it, you do have to keep up with the times, you do have to keep up with where kids are, you do have to reinvent consistently.
So I think that would be sort of my first provocation based on what you said. And then I think obviously, you know, there's schools that have a mission of reproducing societal structures and sort of shutting things down and controlling students, and that is their primary function. And then there's schools that have the opposite mission, which is about opening things up, and they're liberatory in nature, right? Those are the places where the kind of, anywhere you could plug in a hip-hop text in place of a Shakespearean sonnet, but those are the kind of schools where the kind of hip-hop pedagogy that I'm talking about is possible, right? Is the schools where the interest isn't in replicating the existing social systems and systems of oppression in our society, but in upsetting those. And that's where there's actual possibility to really engage in the kind of way that I'm talking about.
And that's an important piece. Like, if you're not also preparing them for, you know, taking these tests.
One of the really key pieces to me is like not, I'm not into the like, we're gonna use Tupac to trick you into the real thing, which is Shakespeare. Like that to me is, I refuse to be a part of things like that, because I don't think that hip hop should be used as like a bait to get students to do something that's the actual important thing, which is the studying of Shakespeare. Like I'm not with that. So I'm totally with bring in Shakespeare, bring in whatever, you know, all these different sources, DMX, you know, like get it all mixed up. I don't think, if it's like black students or urban youth or whatever, however we're defining a cohort, like then, no, they'll just want to know about rappers. Like, I think all students should have the chance to engage with all types of texts, but not in a hierarchical way where it's like, we're assuming, because this, you know, it's a young black man living in a city, if I just use a Nas verse, I can trick him into doing the Shakespeare I really want him to do. I think that a lot of times it's perceived that there's less room to do things than there really is. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Like folks will be like, but we have all these standards and requirements. And then you'll go into another teacher's classroom and they will have figured out how to meet those standards and requirements, and they're bringing Kendrick to school. Right? I mean, if you read the story about what happened there, he was teaching a book and saw a parallel with this album that he knew his students were feeling, and he made the tie-in. That doesn't mean he didn't teach the book, right? So I think sometimes people are quick to jump to the conclusion, or sort of, it's easier to feel like I can't do it because of environmental constraints or time constraints or money constraints or any number of things. And I don't say this to make light of those constraints, because those are incredibly real, and I think teaching is just, at this point in this country, like such an incredibly hard job. But often there's more room. There's more room to push ourselves.
You have one old message.
No, es que tú te crees importante, tú eres grande, you're out here making music, right? You're here making beats. Fuck out of here, yo. You ain't nobody's skinny ass nigga. Es que no, yo no sé quién le dijo.
Hey, yeah, this a new single, but I'm also single,